Retro Hangover is supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Katie Quigg, Paul Ramallo, Raging Demon, JC, Megan Caruso, Masked Llama, Ozzy Garcia, Keith Gasper, and Diskai Mera. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to episode 108 of Retro Hangover.
Hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we meticulously, mightily mime mimes mimicking meddling merit. This is episode 108 of Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, with special guest Josh Covel from the Still Loading podcast. And, as always, your host, Shane Purple Dick Dragon!
Oh.
I screwed that up because I was supposed to say Purple Dick Dragon Heart.
Oh man, yeah, I was like, I don't know what this has to do with the game today, but I'll allow it. That's
I couldn't
fine.
hear you for a solid 3 seconds because you just cut out.
You like that? Yeah, that happens every time. That's how you know it's good.
By the way, that's back-to-back Purple Dicks.
Ooh. I mean, I guess it's on brand, right? It's the whole eggplant thing. Yeah.
I mean, yes.
There you go. Yeah, you definitely did that on purpose.
Big, purple, fat, girthy eggplant.
I'm not to go like way into this again because we kind of already talked about it in the last episode, but I am genuinely surprised at how many of our regular listeners are happy that the Screech is back, but you know, we give the people what they want. So
it's your calling card. It's how everyone recognizes that they're listening to Retro Hangover.
That's true.
We got somebody who came in after we kind of put a sabbatical on the Screaming, who's in our Discord community, and they listened to last episode, the Skies of Arcadia episode, and they're like, oh, I get it. I want more of this. Yeah. Thank you.
They're like, wow. I didn't know about this Dick Dragon thing, but now I do, and my life is forever changed.
But now I want the Dick Dragon.
So I have a heartfelt, probably not genuine, a heartfelt, disingenuine apology to the person that doesn't like my screaming because they're trying to sleep. I'm sorry, not really, that you have to put up with this.
Oh, I'm pretty sure after Skies of Arcadia, they are unsubscribed now. So that's probably fine.
Just find it in yourself to just skip past the intro for a few minutes. We appreciate your viewership.
We're just waiting for it. Just waiting for the day.
It's going to happen. But more to the point, Josh, thank you so much for being here. You are like a really big standard bearer in this retro gaming podcast community, especially within this level, within this circle of podcasters. So I'm really happy that you're here today, dude. Thank you for coming to our humble little podcast, my friend.
I am. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'll take the compliment. Thank you. I just like retro games and I like video games. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Today, we're going to be talking about Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, as you could surmise from the title of the podcast that you already clicked on. So thank you for coming here to check out this episode. But as we are wont to do, prior to us talking about the game du jour, we like to talk about what we are up to in terms of our like kind of personal shit in terms of playing video games or whatever we want to talk about. So, Josh, you are our guest today. How about you kick us off? What have you been playing? What have you been up to, my friend?
So I actually been playing Metroid Prime 2 on the 3DS remake, because I never played the original. I have the original, for the Game Boy, but I've never played it, and I've been meaning to play my 3DS more, so I figured I'd do that. I'm also kind of replaying a little bit of the original Phoenix Wright game because I'm hopefully, I mean, this is a little peek behind the scenes for my own show. I'm hopefully going to be doing an episode on that sometime soon. So I already played through it once before, but I wanted to kind of play through it a little bit again just to get refreshed. So been doing that, and of course I've been playing Medal of Honor Allied Assault, in preparation for this episode.
Good stuff. So what's your thoughts on Metroid 2 for the 3DS? I've heard a lot of mixed stuff. It was generally positive, but I know that another Metroid 2 remake was generally considered to be the better game, and I don't know if you have any reference for comparison.
No reference for comparison. I actually have the original. I know you're also a collector, am I right, Chris?
Yes, a hoarder is probably a better description.
I feel that very much so. I've had to scale back my collecting ever since my kid arrived, so been much more consistent with being, I guess, unfortunately smart with my money and all that bullshit. But
boring.
So I know, right? So, but I have that.
Unfortunately,
I have the original complete in box. Haven't touched it yet, such is the lot of a collector. So far with the remake, I'm enjoying it a decent amount. The controls are pretty good. They don't make you rely on the touchscreen often, except to switch weapon types, like switch between beam types, and it toggles it. So it's not like you have to think. I mean, it would be a stupid design choice to make you press and hold something on the touchscreen to switch weapon types. But so far the controls are pretty good. It is a little bit different than like if you're used to Super Metroid or something. And I think they do this in Metroid Dread. I've played a little bit of that as well. With Metroid Dread, it has like a melee option, I believe, too. Like you hit, I forget which button you hit on the Switch, but Samus swipes up with her arm cannon to like deflect oncoming enemies, and it stuns them for a little bit, and then you can shoot them. That apparently existed in the original game too. Obviously makes an appearance again in the remake, but so far graphics look really nice. The game is fun so far. Don't really have much to compare it to, but I've also barely been able to play it. I've been editing episodes for the podcast mostly.
Sure, Shane knows that feeling.
I was going to say that such is the life of the independent podcaster. It's like, what have you been up to? Making content. That's it.
That's pretty much. I actually was streaming Medal of Honor Allied Assault though on my Twitch channel in preparation for this. It almost as like kind of sucks. Like once you get into the job, well, I shouldn't say job, but I do this on the side. But once you kind of get into the habit of making content, it almost feels like every game you play, at least in the retro gaming space, it almost feels like every game you play is like, well, if this isn't for the podcast, I shouldn't be doing this. And it's an awful feeling. I have set aside time. I was doing it better earlier last year, where I would pick a game to play on stream, pick a game to talk about on the podcast, and then pick a game to play on my own. So like the game on stream was something I'd play once a week. So it's not like I was devoting a lot of time to it or anything like that. And then the game I would play for the podcast, I would devote a lot of time to, because, you have the schedule. And then on my own was everything in between. The on my own stuff has dropped off because now my kid is starting to walk and she can pay attention to stuff now. So I don't really want to be playing, like Red Dead Redemption 2 in front of her just yet. I know she doesn't understand anything, but I'd rather not have her see dad shooting people in the head, or KKK members. I mean, they deserve it, but shooting people in the head.
Gonna raise her to be one of those Trigun girls just walking around with
Yeah.
For those who like anime, that's what I'm talking
about. Millie and oh my gosh, I forget the character's name. I haven't watched that anime in forever.
Yeah, neither have I. Still fantastic.
That just brought back so many memories. It's a great show.
Oh yeah, but I know what you're saying, and I'll kind of use that to segue into what I've been playing. I've been playing Soma on PC on Steam. I may have mentioned this before in prior episodes, I'm not sure. I'm also playing Romance of the Three NCAA Conferences 2008. I continue to play that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to the previous episode. But I've been playing Soma for the PC, and one of the ways, Josh, I've been kind of mitigating this, as well as I believe Shane has, is we came up with like rapid fire reviews for our patrons. And so we're playing a game that we're playing for ourselves, but we can still tie it into the podcast. That way, you don't feel so guilty about playing a game that's not tied into what you're supposed to be doing in terms of just the content you're supposed to be putting out to everybody on the main feed. I've been playing Soma. I'm looking to try and get a Gaiden out there to our listeners because I'm having a really good time with it. I'm really appreciating it for what it is. I do want to go into it fully because, of course, it's not a perfect game. Very few games are. I do want to talk about all its intricacies and so on and so forth. So that's going to be coming to patrons in way of an RH Gaiden. And it looks like right now we're going to have some more support from Region Free Gamers, which is going on our King of Games 2000, which is being released to everybody. So you should check that out as well. That our first episode that we hosted would be out last week. And that was covering. Do you remember what that was covering, Shane? Was that Tony Hawk versus No Mercy?
I believe that is the one. Yes.
Yes. So that's there. So other than that, like nothing's really changed. I'm still in the chronicles of adjusting to my new workspace in my personal life. And I will say that it's interesting still. They're giving me the things to how do I put this, man?
They're giving you the work that nobody else wanted to do.
That's one aspect. Yes, that's true. Because I have talked to Shane about this. So I showed up to this place and I'm like, hi, I'm here. And they're like, hi, welcome. We have big plans for you. I'm like, oh, they're like, yes. I'm like, what are they? We don't know. Cool. So I don't know quite what I'm doing yet. They seem to have an idea of what that will be, what that is. I don't know. It's not there yet. I've been there a month now, but I have been given something where it's kind of like, hey, this big thing needs to happen within a week because this person that has it is leaving soon. I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to get all of it before they leave. So you're going to have to figure it out. Okay. And it's one of those things that is heavily reliant on understanding so you can help the people, within your job. I'm trying to be very vague because it's in the military. I don't want to be too specific. And I mean, any job is like that, right?
It basically just sounds like, you're getting a new job. The person who did the job prior is going to be gone by the time that before you're fully trained. So you're going to have to just figure shit out on the fly. And I feel like that's almost every job ever, where it's just like, just throw you into the deep end and hope you don't hope you don't sink.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. So I'm not alone. So it is for everybody. Haha, everybody. I'm part of you now.
Well, except with the military now it's like, well, here's expensive weapons. I don't know if it has anything to do with that. Don't confirm or deny, but you get what I'm saying.
I will not confirm or deny. Now you're making my job sound more interesting. Here we go.
Ooh.
But that's me. Just NCAA 2008, Romance of the Three NCAAs 2008. Soma.
I want to see that game.
Which one?
Romance of the Three NCAAs or whatever. Like, I want to see all the different college leagues have a all-out war, like Romance of the Three Kingdoms style. I want to see that game. It'll be like a weird hybrid general manager game.
I think that would actually work. Work.
Maybe like you're a college sports director of the entire college, and you have to manage all of the different sports programs: basketball, baseball, hockey, football. And for some reason, you're also the general manager of all of those programs at the same time. So you have to do recruitment. Holy shit, that would be wild.
Actually, yeah, that actually sounds really good. You have to manage all the sports programs, not just football. That'd be wild.
There's no difficulty difference except maybe the college that you are managing and how many programs you want to manage. So easy difficulty would be one program. You're only managing the football or the hockey or the baseball or whatever. But harder difficulties, you have to keep abreast of everything, and then you have to do all of that. So there would be built-in difficulty scaling without even having to, like an FPS where they just make the enemies harder to kill and they hit harder. It's none of that shit. It's just you have to manage more.
Just a random example that has nothing to do with today's episode at all.
All right, Shay, how about yourself? What have you been up to?
Well, what is probably going to come as a surprise to no one that listens to the show fairly regularly, we have been up to moving to a new house. So it's been a lot of just unpacking. Not much in the way of gaming because we're both pretty just exhausted by the end of the day. But I, of course, cranked through the Medal of Honor campaign in roughly 7-ish hours, got that knocked out again. So that was a good refresher. And other than that, I'm still diligently plinking away at Skies of Arcadia, even though we have already finished our episode on that and it's out there in the ether. I do still actually want to finish the game. So I just streamed that on our most recent Sunday stream. So making progress there. And then outside of that, I'm trying to get back to leveling my newest seasonal character in Diablo 3 on the Switch, and hopefully getting around to picking back up some of my D2R characters as well. I have a Hammerdin that I need to keep leveling, and then of course, I went, and Chris knows this, I went and bought a whole shitload of very long JRPGs for my 3DS because I totally have time to play that right now. So maybe I'll get to those someday. Probably the Etrian Odyssey one first, I think. But
yes,
we'll see. But yeah, that's what I have been up to. A lot of box unpacking.
I forgot to mention, I also have been playing Age of Empires.
Ooh, it's a fun game.
Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition specifically.
Ooh.
Do you guys play RTS games at all?
Ooh, not anymore.
I have not in a long time.
Yeah.
I used to be into StarCraft pretty heavily back in the day, but
Same.
If you ever do RTS games, let me know. I would love to come back. I did a small series on my show on the history of RTS games. I got up to like the mid 97 if you're going chronologically. And that's when all of a sudden it went from like 5 RTS games a year to like 20. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not covering 20.
No.
Like, it just having to sift through 20 different games per year just to see if there's anything new or unique in them. I'm like, you know what? I got up to Age of Empires. I'm good. I feel like we've gotten to the point where RTS is a thing. I'm okay with not covering the rest, for at least not for a long time. It's so much work.
Yeah, that sounds like our history of D&D episode where there were several years where we were just like, yes, and this was also a game that was released. Anyway,
moving on.
Exactly. And it's like at some point there's just not, some of them, there's just no innovation to it. And I'm not trying to be, rude to the game. It's just, you can't, not every game is going to break the mold. It's not possible.
Oh, sure.
I just don't feel like spending the time to figure out which games did break the mold. I'm not affiliated with this at all, but there's an awesome thing. If you guys are interested in watching, there's this tournament that happens usually in March. It's called the Hidden Cup, and it's done by this Twitch. Well, he's on Facebook Gaming, so that kind of upsets me a bit. Named T90, and what he does is he has this tournament called the Hidden Cup, where basically he gets, I think it's like 8 pros, he invites 8 different pros who play, Age of Empires 2 definitive, like professionally. And then he has 8 other people that have to compete to get in. And what happens is, so it's, total of 16 different players. They all play under different aliases than the normal online alias, and they don't know who each other are. So they usually play under like a history persona, like Joan of Arc versus Attila the Hun or something like that. And none of the players know who each other are, so they can't like prep beforehand. And the broadcasters don't know who anybody else is. The audience doesn't know who anybody else is. So the whole tournament is going through. The broadcasters, they do research on the play styles of each of the players. So that way part of the game of it for people watching is like, all right, who is this? Who is this player? Is this, the Viper? Is this Tato or something like that? Those are some of the names from people in the scene. And so you go through the tournament and you have to guess, and eventually, they knock people out bit by bit. It usually happens over the course of a weekend too. It's like a Thursday through Sunday event. And they do like best of 5s and best of 7s because games last about 20 to 40 minutes, sometimes an hour if they're like really, really long. But they just knock them all out. And at the end, they have a big reveal of who everyone was. And it becomes a big reveal of who actually won the grand prize. And like, there's a good chunk of change for the winner. Like, I think there was a prize pool of like over 20K last time.
Nice. That's a pretty cool way to do it too. Because then that way, from a competitive standpoint, also that totally shakes things up because you have no idea what to expect in terms of strategy, right?
And that's why they do like the best of 5s and once you get to the higher rounds, it's best of 7s. So like you can get an idea of like what your opponent's tendencies are through those things, but you still don't know who the opponent is. And then even at the end of the tournament, they have a whole bunch of polls where they have the viewers guess who everyone is, and they put what the top guess for each of these aliases were. It has the players guess who each other were, and usually like the players are obviously closer because they're used to fighting against each other. And then I believe the announcers also have their guesses as well, so they show them all up on the screen, and then obviously they show the real answers and who everyone is. If you're curious and you want to see what it is before you invest any time, you can watch it all on YouTube.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
So there's like, I think Hidden Cup 4 was the most recent one. So Hidden Cup 5 will be in March.
Sounds like a fun time.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. See, actually, the week we're recording this is Games Done Quick. That's also fun to watch.
Ah, yes. We were also just talking about that. I try to make a point of watching that every time it comes around. It's always a good time. So that's been a mainstay on my second monitor during the day. So.
But yeah, sorry. That was the one last thing I want to bring up. I forgot I've been playing. In between editing sessions, I'll be playing a round of Age of Empires.
Nice.
But moving on, I think it's time that we talk about the game that's bringing us all together here today. And that is Medal of Honor Allied Assault. It's a World War II shooter. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that a lot when we get to, well, the proper segment for that. But before that, we'd like to open it up by talking about the history of the game that, well, is the subject of this episode. And for today, we're going to have Shane talk to you about the brief history of Medal of Honor Allied Assault.
World War II shooters. If you're listening to us, you probably remember a time where every major FPS that wasn't set in space took place at or around the time when most of Europe was super into killing Nazis. Electronic Arts was undoubtedly a huge player in this market, having kicked off its own successful series, Medal of Honor, in 1999 that received a follow-up with Medal of Honor Underground in 2000. Both of these games were exclusive to Sony's PlayStation console, but in early 2002, EA decided to up the ante and make a title exclusively for the PC. Electronic Arts would tap 2015 Incorporated to develop the game, and like most sequels under the EA banner, it appears to be a sequel made mostly for sequel's sake. Since the franchise would be transitioning to PC, EA felt it best to leverage a modified version of id Software's Quake 3 engine, arguably one of the best game engines available at the time, and one they had some familiarity with from the development and release of American McGee's Alice just a couple of years prior. Perhaps the biggest differentiator between this Medal of Honor title and its predecessors would be series creator and noted film director Steven Spielberg stepping in to assist with the writing and plot development. A seemingly no-brainer decision considering Spielberg's runaway success with his recent HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. The game would focus largely on the Allied campaign in Europe and North Africa, and would of course have a level that took place during D-Day, the amphibious invasion of Normandy, France. Medal of Honor Allied Assault would eventually see release on January 22nd of 2002 in North America and February 15th of the same year in Europe. Reception, both critically and commercially, was overwhelmingly positive, with the game receiving several Best of 2002 accolades for both sound design and gameplay. In terms of sales, Allied Assault shifted over 2 million units during its initial run, and would bolster those numbers with 2 expansion packs entitled Spearhead and Breakthrough. And that is your brief history of Medal of Honor Allied Assault.
I honestly thought, Shane, and thank you for that riveting brief history right there.
Of course.
Yes. I honestly thought that there would be more to the history of this game. I should have known better because this is an EA game. And because it's an EA game, it was just made because EA likes to make money, and I can't fault them for that. However, I will give it credit that it was the first Medal of Honor game on the PC. That I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
So I was quite shocked there.
Well, the thing is with this game is that I don't know if we're going to talk about this later. I don't think I even wrote it down on my notes, but this game was developed by the same people who would go on to make Infinity Ward and the Call of Duty games.
Mm-hmm.
The director of this game was the same person, or I believe one of the same people. Totally blanking on his name, but I'll look it up in like 2 seconds. But it kind of shows like the design for this is I'm a big Medal of Honor fan. I guess I've been a huge fan of the series ever since the first one came out. Even the ones that no one likes, like the ones that go into the modern era, I still enjoyed. Vince Zampella and Jason West, those are the guys who went on to create Infinity Ward. But I've always been a fan of the Medal of Honor games, and this game offered something a little bit different from the ones previously. So it wasn't just necessarily like, here's a new version of the same thing. There are elements of that, and we'll get into that later. But like with this, there was a lot more open-ended areas for you to explore because the PC could do more than home consoles at the time. And there was a larger sense of scale, I would say, especially like, I forget, did you guys, in the notes, I don't think I saw it, but you guys have only, I think, Shane, you've only played this one, and Chris, you've never played a Medal of Honor until this one, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so in Medal of Honor Frontline for the PS2, which came out later this year, or within the same year, they did a D-Day scene just like this one. And in all honesty, the D-Day scene in this one feels more intense than the D-Day scene in PS2. But the PS2 one has a little bit more of a cinematic vibe to it. So it's really interesting, the comparisons. They both did D-Day scenes, but PS2 opens the game, like Medal of Honor Frontlines opens the game with the Omaha Beach, which I feel like that's just every single World War II game had to have an Omaha Beach landing scene. Saving Private Ryan, man, it just like influenced every World War II game.
Much to the genre's detriment. And
yeah,
I don't know how much we're going to be able to talk about it just because we're going to be talking about the game as a singular entity in a sense. But one of the things that you'll see with World War II shooters, especially during this time, and it wasn't necessarily Allied Assault's fault, right? Because even when I was looking at the brief history and how much first-person shooters were coming out at this time in regards to World War II, it really was only Medal of Honor. And Call of Duty wasn't out yet at the time that this game came out. Like the original Call of Duty came out in, what, 2003? So Medal of Honor Allied Assault was there, but you had a glut of World War II shooters. So when you start talking about first-person shooters, especially set in the time period of World War II, they can all really start to blend together unless you want to do a hyper-focused analysis on a game like we're kind of doing today. So I'm sure that a lot of people out there are going to look at this game fondly. If you're a PC head and you played this game, absolutely, and you're getting into this. But just to say, like, we are talking about a game that definitely during that era was flooded with games that were similar. And I would say probably because of the success of the Medal of Honor franchise. And that's nothing to really sneeze at, especially when you go to the PC. And I don't know what the previous two Medal of Honors did either. And that kind of transitioned us into our personal experiences. And that's where I'm just going to say with my own personal experience here about the genre as a whole is if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that I do not like first person shooters. I'm not very like animated about it generally, because generally we don't do first person shooters. But I'm just going to lay that out there. I'm not a big fan of first person shooters in general. So this has been like forever for me. So I didn't play any of the Medal of Honor games on the PlayStation. I didn't play Medal of Honor Allied Assault on the PC. I didn't have a PC that could handle it. So opening my eyes to playing these games. And, you know, I do have to thank Shane for this, because Shane, it was the one who said, hey, we should do an episode on this because it's turning 20 this year, 20th anniversary. And Shane has a lot of a different personal experience story that he wants to tell here. And that's why we're bringing it here. So Shane, yes, how about you share your personal experience when it comes to Medal of Honor Allied Assault?
Sure. Yeah. Interestingly, or perhaps not, I don't know, I guess depends on how you view it. This tends to come up a lot, I've noticed, which I feel is part of, you know, that certain je ne sais quoi that is the, you know, dynamic between Chris and I, in that a lot of Chris's personal experiences are just total polar opposites of mine.
Yeah.
And this is really no exception, in that while he had never played any of them and always sort of associated Medal of Honor with the PlayStation, and perhaps rightly so, since that's kind of where it started, I, on the other hand, being almost exclusively a PC gamer for a decent little chunk of, like, you know, the early aughts, I was always under the impression that Medal of Honor was a PC centric series. And I thought that the console releases were just like these weird stepchild off spin titles or something, which I'm evidently egregiously wrong about. But that's kind of my personal experience. I had come to it pretty close to release, I think, because I recall playing this game and the original Call of Duty single player campaign roughly around the same time. And that's also part of the reason why, even to this day, having played the campaign of Medal of Honor again within the last week, I still conflate the two in my head, in that I kind of get the two of them mixed up a lot of the time, where I'm just like, oh yeah, there's that really great like sequence in that. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was Call of Duty, and vice versa.
Right.
But yeah, I remember having a lot of fun with this. And at the time, especially, the D-Day sequence is always something that stuck out to me personally, just because it was such like an intense sequence. I mean, it's not ever something that's necessarily, I still think that, you know, Saving Private Ryan is probably the gold standard for portraying that, right? But I remember thinking that the level in this game was pretty damn close, and perhaps for good reasons given who's involved. It was just like, it was such an intense level. And then kind of going back to it now, I'm just like, I feel like this, I remember this very differently. We'll get into some of that in a little bit, but that was one of those like memories from when I was younger that perhaps should have stayed a memory. Let's just say
the rose-colored goggles of youth and nostalgia.
Indeed, yes, exactly.
Always rear their ugly heads. Always.
Yeah, it's like basically our entire Clive Barker's Undying episode. It's just me being like, I thought this game was better.
Maybe was, and maybe. So Josh, you kind of briefly touched on your personal experience with this,
yeah,
but you didn't really get into a personal experience with this game, like focused wise. So what do you have for this? I'm
going to go back just a little bit, and I'm going to focus on this game, but I just want to briefly explain how I first got into Medal of Honor. So I saw the original game over at a friend's house, at a church friend's house. And I was one of those kids who was really into World War II. I was fascinated by the history of it. And so when I saw this game, I was like, oh my gosh, this is right up my alley. And I begged my parents to get it, but we didn't have a PlayStation at the time. When I found out there was a PC game, because I had already played, by the time I found out there was a PC game, I had already played the original and its sequel, Medal of Honor Underground, which does tie into the plot of this game, which we'll get into later on. But we didn't have a nice enough computer to handle anything. So I actually played this game. I have two stories about this game specifically from my personal experiences. One, we bought the game knowing that I didn't have a computer that could handle it. My uncle was nice enough that whenever we were over at his house, I could bring the game over to play it on his PC, which could handle it. So for years, I had a copy of this game, but no way to play it except if I visited my uncle's house. And that was the only place I could go at the time to play it. And then I never actually beat it until for this episode. I got far, but because it was always at my uncle's house and I couldn't really play it at home. And by the time I had a computer that could handle it, I had moved past the game. It wasn't really my thing. That was my first experience. The second one involves the multiplayer. I don't really have a lot of experiences with the multiplayer because in general, I'm more of a single player type of guy. But in high school, my programming teacher, at the end of the semester, he would pretty much just say, fuck it, and let kids play games on the school computers. Like we set up like death matches, like LAN parties with other classrooms. And we played this game multiplayer in death matches. Like it was our classroom against the classroom down the hall. And we would have multiplayer death matches as a LAN party using the school's computers. He would install the game on everyone's computers. It was amazing. So those are my two biggest memories, playing the game at my uncle's house, because that's the only way I could play it. And then playing multiplayer at the end of school in high school, which at the time, the game would have been not old, but not new. I graduated in like 2007. So it would have been right around a decent time. So it was probably like 2004 or 2005 that we were doing this, which is just nuts to me. I'm still amazed my programming teacher did that. It's one of my favorite classes, one of my favorite school memories ever.
That reminds me of like our computer class, because we had computer club. And one of the things we would do after school in middle school, not high school, like you were saying, but like in middle school. And this is probably wildly inappropriate. We had IMAX, and for some reason,
You're right. IMAX are wildly inappropriate.
yes, Syndicate was installed on all of them.
Oh, jeez.
So,
Oh my gosh.
So we were like 11, 12 years old playing Syndicate and Computer Club after school. And that's what we would do there after learning how to type. Like, okay, learn how to type, now kill people. So yeah, like Computer Club in schools, that's what it's for, parents. I hope you're not concerned.
It's a lawless wasteland.
The good old days.
I remember, so that same programming teacher, I don't know if he still works at the school, so I'm not going to say his name just in case this gets him in trouble. He was a firm believer in reverse peer pressure, where if he caught someone, because he had the software that he could monitor everyone's screen and see what they were doing. So if he caught someone dicking around, he would just yell out save, and that was code for save your work because I'm shutting everyone's computers down right now.
Nice.
And so we would have to scramble and save. Thankfully, I was always fine, but it always ended up everyone looking around like, who was the asshole that was dicking around? And there was this one kid named Will. The teacher liked him, but he also at the same time like didn't take any of Will's shit. Like there was times when like Will came into the classroom with a soda in his hand, and that's a huge no-no in a computer lab, especially in school. And he just took he just took Will's soda, opened up the window and dumped it out in front of him. Like he had just bought it like a second ago. I don't even know if it was opened yet, but it's like, you don't do that. And he might have just opened it. And then there was another time he asked Will to watch the classroom while he went to the bathroom. And Will decided, I'm going to mess around with the teacher's desktop icons. And he tricked him the one time thinking he actually did it, but he eventually did do this. He deleted the kid's entire personal like Z drive, or, you know, like the shared drive that you have, the network drive.
Right.
Because at one point he had just done it so many times. It was close to the end of the semester too. So I don't know if it really screwed Will over, but like this kid had a tendency to dick around in class. But I love that teacher, man. He would have us watch strong bad emails in the middle of class.
Nice.
Tractor.
Sorry, that was a tangent. We can continue on with Medal of Honor Allied Assault.
No, that actually really reminds me of my high school computer programming teacher. Also, I think that must come with the territory. I feel like, because that's not the only time I've heard a similar story to
Programming teachers.
I have to say that Will is probably Willie from the Grand Rapidians.
That son of a bitch. This all makes sense now.
He's a little bit older, but he may have been masquerading as another Will. You never know. Shout outs to the Grand Rapidians. Play video games podcast.
All those Wills just pretending to be each other.
Yes.
It's actually all the same Will.
While we're telling great stories, I think it's time to talk about the story of this game and plot writing.
What story?
Yeah,
great.
Exactly.
Moving on.
It's World War II. You're killing Nazis.
Nazis.
So, I'll get to my like small take about it. I just have a really small take. But to start this one off, Josh, how about you kind of give your synopsis about the story, which you kind of already alluded to in that brief snip.
So the whole premise is you play as this character named Lieutenant Mike Powell, and you are pretty much like drafted into the Office of Strategic Services, which is pretty much the proto CIA. And it was a real thing. And this game actually is like, Medal of Honor games are generally fairly historically accurate, but they do take liberties with history to tell their stories. Like each mission has its own somewhat story. Like it gives you a mission to do, but generally the missions don't connect to each other. So there's not like this big overarching story. So each mission has its own beginning and end, but you don't really feel satisfied because there's no story within those missions other than, oh, there's this experimental tiger tank you have to go find it, and then you find it, and that's the end of the mission, and that's it. Or you blow up that tiger tank, something like that. There's usually some experimental weapon and you have to find it. There are some missions that connect to each other, like the one mission you have to find the plans to the King Tiger tank, and the next mission you actually have to find the tiger tank itself. By and large, the missions don't connect to each other. And there are some callbacks to older games. In the one mission, you meet a French resistance member named Manon Baptiste, and she is the protagonist from Medal of Honor Underground, which is the second game in the series. The final mission of the game is a place called Fort Schmerzen. I know I didn't say that correctly. Schmerzen? What do you guys think? Schmerzen?
That sounds right.
The Schwartz.
Schitzen?
I put that as the Schwartz.
Fort Schwartz.
Fort Schwartz be with you.
May the Schwartz be with you.
Yeah.
And also with you.
The fact that you mentioned in the brief history that Steven Spielberg lended writing credit to this, and in what realm what did he offer for this? Was it just historical accuracy? Because
it's an excellent question.
This actually made me really upset.
Probably.
So I never actually beat the original Medal of Honor because it was the final mission was always so hard for me as a kid. But the end of Medal of Honor, the original Medal of Honor, you play as Lieutenant James Patterson, or maybe not Lieutenant, James Patterson, and you blow up this German plant that's producing mustard gas. And wouldn't you know it, that's also the final mission of this game. And wouldn't you also know it, it's the same exact fucking fort. And the whole thing is you go back, discover that the Nazis conveniently rebuilt Fort Schwarzen. Fort Schwartz. And they rebuilt it, and now it's producing mustard gas again. And I just think that's lazy writing. And if it's historically accurate, okay, then fair enough. But I don't know if it is or not in that aspect. But it just seems like you're just rehashing. And even if it is, why would you rehash the exact same plot point as a game that came out literally like it's just 2 games ago? You're just telling the exact same story again, but with a different character and different missions. I got really upset about that.
You know, one of the things I think you're talking about here is like the disappointment on the story. And this isn't really my take here, because my take's going to be pretty short and ridiculous. I'm just going to, there's your foreshadowing on my take. It's just going to be silly. But when it comes to what you're talking about, these kind of connected but not disjointed plot lines where you're like, why is it you're getting a recreation of one plot line to the next game, or why is it all the same? First person shooters, generally speaking, didn't have good plots at this time. There were definitely exceptions that laid the ground for first person shooters to figure it out, like Half-Life, and soon to come after this, Half-Life 2, because Half-Life came out in 98. So that kind of was a revelation of first person shooters. Other than that, first person shooters were just, they're like, do this mission that's conveniently here, and nothing is really connected, but it's connected. They never really had good storytelling. And I think that's more of the situation here. It's just a victim of what was happening with first-person shooters at this time as a whole. It had not established any sort of real narrative or a conjoined narrative throughout the game that could be told until much later that you got with other first-person shooters.
That is a very good point.
Even then, like even the Call of Duty series or most of these war simulators, they really didn't try to tell a story as other first-person shooters did. It's just very unique to this situation, I think, and this genre, I would say.
No, I think you're right, and I didn't even think of it that way, of like the storytelling of FPSs at the time. I was comparing it more to modern sensibilities, which is obviously something we'll get into a little bit later. But what it kind of reminds me of is the Uncharted design method. You know how in Uncharted games, they pick set pieces and they design a story around it. And that's why, have you guys played Uncharted 3 at all?
No, I haven't.
I have not.
Basically, without going into that, because that would be a whole tangent, there is an amazing gameplay set piece that has nothing to do with the story, but they kept it in because it was a good set piece. You could literally remove it from the game and it wouldn't affect the story at all. The plus side is that it has one of the best segments of the game. It's really well designed, but the downside is in terms of story, it makes no sense. And this game kind of reminds me of that, where they decided like, what are some cool World War II set pieces? The most common one that we referenced it before is the D-Day landing, Omaha Beach. Operation Overlord specifically, whether you're one of the paratroopers dropping in behind enemy lines or you are one of the men landing on the beach. They pick these set pieces. Now, where I think it does well with this, instead of trying to, like you were saying, Chris, narrative wasn't really a big focus back then for FPSs specifically. They went at the approach of like, well, let's treat this as a historical thing. Hence why like they have all those historical, like all the footage in the beginning and with the narration over top of it, kind of explaining what's happening in the war at the time and that kind of thing. So I think they did a good job of trying to make you, instead of trying to tell a story, they're trying to make you feel like you are one of the soldiers participating in this real life mission. And in that aspect, I think it actually does pretty decently in telling a story. It's just the story is boring because it's almost military-esque. There's not a lot of like emotion behind it. It's just, you got to do this, so you just go do it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Shane.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, Chris, you did bring up a good point, and it's something that I made a note of as well, is that, you know, when we talk about this, you do have to keep in mind of the time period in which it was released. And you can even hone it down to specifically World War II games around or before this time. I mean, you had like things that you could call out would be right around this time period, be like Hidden and Dangerous, like Deadly Dozen. Those all came out right around here, like right before this. Of course, you had Wolfenstein 3D.
And I've only heard of one of those 3 games, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. I think I actually had a boxed copy of Deadly Dozen back in the day, now that I think about it. But anyway, there wasn't exactly a whole lot of storytelling chops going into a lot of these things. An effort was made on some accounts, but by and large, you didn't really have, you know, really great plot through lines in a lot of these titles. And so I suppose if you're looking at it from that perspective, that might be some of that Spielberg influence there. But of course, looking at it from our perspective in 2022, I think we expect a lot more from our games and from those plots. We want to have an involved story and to be invested in the characters. And later games in these series would also do that. I mean, it's something like COD Blops comes to mind, right? Like that is like Call of Duty. Like that's a really great plot line where you're invested in those characters and you've kind of followed them throughout. There's a lot of really awesome interpersonal relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't get that here, but what it does do, I think it does fairly well. I will say that, you know, it's enough to kind of like hang the conceit of the game on, and, you know, a lot of griping about maybe the weak plot aside, I think the writing itself is actually mostly pretty solid. There was never a point where I was listening to any of the dialogue or reading any of the, you know, mission briefs that you see on the loading screens where I thought like, oh, this is pretty garbage, or, you know, whatever. Like it was all believable and delivered in a believable way, which we'll get to in a little bit with the sound. But I think it went a pretty long way in immersing you in this role of, you know, Lieutenant Powell, which is something that they, I think, tried really hard to do, which is interesting because there are some things and some choices that were made that I feel like are completely antithetical to their effort to try to get the player immersed in this, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But by and large, yeah, it's nothing to write home about. No pun intended, I guess. Yeah. But it's, you know, I think it was doing more than what a lot of games were doing at the time. FPSs in particular. I mean, Half-Life is its own thing, which also just a fun aside on that. When we were looking through the background information about this game, one of the critics that reviewed this went on record as saying that this was the best first-person shooter since Half-Life, which is big shoes to fill.
That's high praise.
Yeah,
it is high praise. Very high praise.
You made a good point about it. This kind of leads into our next section, but like the immersiveness of like the way it tells the story. I do think it's interesting that they try to immerse you in a character that's not a character. Like there's nothing to Lieutenant Holt. He's just a guy. With that said, that might be a specific choice to make you feel like the soldier in the trenches. Like, don't make the character stand out, so that way the player can become the character themselves. The player can inject themselves into these scenarios, into these real life events and missions, which is I always thought was one of the cooler things about the Medal of Honor games, where they actually went in and everything was based off of real life events. In fact, this one I was really excited about when I first played it, because the first mission, Lighting the Torch, takes place in 1942 in North Africa. And as much as I loved World War II games and World War II shooters, you don't see a lot of talk about the combat and the battles in North Africa during World War II. It just focuses a lot on...
You really don't.
It focuses on the European theater, and it focuses on the Pacific Island theater. And that makes sense because that's where the majority of the battles took place. But you don't see a lot of North Africa. You don't see a lot of Italy, which I know is part of Europe, but there was a whole lot of combat that was happening in Italy. I mean, you see it referenced all the fucking time in World War II media, where like some dude's brother died at Monte Cassino. And for some reason, that's like a sticking point with a lot of characters and like at least the movies that I watched. movies and shows that I watch, but you never see anything in games or movies covering what happened in Monte Cassino. I always find it a little bit of a breath of fresh air when it's like, here's something that you don't see in World War II era, you know, or like in games that cover this period. I found that really interesting. And I was really happy they had that in the first mission.
Yeah, which is a pleasant surprise, particularly for a topic like World War II that has been done to death. It's nice to see that there are actually aspects of it that are somewhat underserved. Like there's still material there.
Oh, yeah.
You could make a full game. And it's been years since I've like really been into like World War II history, but like the German General Rommel became famous for his tactics in North Africa. So like, why isn't there like a whole game involving like the cat and mouse game that was going on between the Allied generals and the Nazi generals, or a movie or something? Like, I feel like I don't know enough info. It's just about those battles to see if that would actually make a good drama. But like, I think, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I could be misremembering entirely, but I could have sworn like Rommel would do stuff like he would like brush up more dust so that way it makes his like more sand, so that way his army would look bigger from a distance. So like the Allies would see him moving his tanks or whatever across the desert, and it looked a lot larger than it actually was because they brought up such a storm. It made it seem like there was a lot more tanks or units or whatever. I could be completely misremembering that. So if you guys know more than I do on that, feel free to call me out, or listeners, by the way. That's something I vaguely remember.
I can't speak to that. I don't know if Shane can.
No, but it sounds right to me.
It sounds impressive.
I'm going to speak authoritatively like I do know what I'm talking about.
There you go.
But I will say, hey, look, if anyone knows any games or movies or any sort of media that talks about the theater in North Africa for World War II, like, let us know, and I'll forward it over here to Josh, and because it sounds like he's extremely interested in it, because that is an important part of World War II, to be honest. Here's my take on the writing. Okay, so I'm in the military, as many of you know. I will say that the briefings made me feel a lot like I was going through military briefing, which is I fell asleep through a lot of it because I kind of already knew the point of what I was supposed to do. So you want me to go do this thing at the thing, and yeah, and you're just trying to motivate the shit out of me on my way there. Okay, got it. What do you want me to do? That's all I need to know. Get me to point B.
Just hold tab on my keyboard so I can see your objectives.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Just basically tell me what you want me to do. I don't care about all the motivational shit. I get some people. Yeah, some people like it. Cool. Whatever. Okay, cool. But I don't care. Okay. I know that you need that for a video game. I know this is a very more unique situation in my case. The second thing is you control Lieutenant Powell. Now, if you're in the Navy like me, you might be thinking that a lieutenant is an 03, someone who's been in the Navy for 4 years. What you don't know is a lieutenant in the Army is probably, in this case, I don't know if he's a first or second lieutenant. It doesn't matter. They've been in the Navy or Army for 2 years, and, well, going by modern standards. So you're talking about someone who just became an officer, just got thrown into the Army. Modern standards, I don't know what the case was in World War II. If you're going to crucify me, go ahead. I don't give a fuck. This is what I'm saying. This person is freshly commissioned, hanging around with sergeants and shit, and your sergeants and your private first classes and your specialists are getting mowed down by Nazis, and you, the green, fresh behind the ears lieutenant first class, is just like, I'm a super sniper and multiple weapons and shit, and I am your spec ops god. It doesn't work like that. It never works like that. Okay, maybe it did. Maybe this is a realistic writing situation. I don't fucking know. Please don't kill me. I'm just saying, my suspension of disbelief, no disrespect to my commissioned officers in the Navy, because they can technically fire me for that. So I will say that I love all of you with my utmost respect.
Pre-arguing.
But a lot of the junior officers don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Different situation, different time. That's why the writing is a little bit incredible to me. However, I understand World War II was entirely different circumstances. So I may be way off base here. I am sorry if that's the case. If I'm not, fuck you. And
there you go.
I do have to say this as well. I have to give this game credit because I do think this was the first game that did D-Day the way it did it. It's very tropic. It's a huge trope in World War II shooters to do the D-Day amphibious assault on Omaha Beach. That is something that is like almost mandatory to be in your D-Day shooters. This was the game that said, okay, we did it correctly. Now all you have to do it too. So this was the one who did it first. Thank you for doing it first. Thank you for doing it somewhat correctly. And, you know, fuck all the other games that couldn't get an original idea. There's my writing. Thank you.
Welcome to his TED Talk.
This is my Medal of Honor TED Talk.
Yeah.
MOHTT.